I've been making videos for a good 15-ish years now. Making them since I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I learned a lesson on this video that I feel like I should have learned a very long time ago. And that lesson is, don't wipe a memory card without checking what's on it. So I accidentally erased all the footage. Fortunately, I also deleted the audio, but I had a backup mic recording audio. It sounds terrible. I never intended to use it, but now it's all that I have left. So please enjoy this audio. Hello and welcome. My name's Ben. I'm sitting here with my friend Dakota, and today we're talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Today, we are going through the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as my friend here just said, and the main point of this video is we are going to be discussing what we would like, in our own personal opinions, fixes or at least changes we would like to make for any future adaptations or continuations to perhaps not quite be as bad as they've gotten over the years.
Yeah, so I guess in this video, we're not doing so much what we did in the Friday the 13th video, where we're talking about a desired sequel or what we predict a sequel will be. We're more so talking about how we felt the series has... It's fluctuated in quality, but how it's in general descended from the peaks that were the first film, and then what we think are the elements that would make a reinstallment, a new installment, work. So not so much actually coming up with a plot, more so just what elements would make a new film work, as opposed to some of the less than stellar sequels, reboots, and remakes that have come out.
Absolutely.
So I guess to start, we'll talk about the lineage of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre I consider to be a masterpiece. I think it's gritty, raw, has a real sense of realism. You really connect to the characters in that film. It makes you feel very... What's the word you would describe it? It makes you feel very... well, for starters, you feel the heat in that movie. You're sweating with the characters. You feel pressure. You feel anxiety.
Yeah.
You feel the shock that the characters in the film
Absolutely,
go through, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's for lack of any better word, really, it's just a true horror classic. It was a passion. You could see the passion and the dedication put through with the crew, and from the settings to the writing to everything, really. There is not one aspect of this movie that I think isn't in its own way iconic or widely influential.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points as well. The sequel, then. So we have this first Texas movie, which creates this extremely, I use the word raw, this extremely raw environment that feels real and feels hot and feels tense, like the pressure's pounding down on you in that movie, and it's a creepy, and it's realistic, like I said. And the second movie ignores a lot of that and goes for a comedic approach.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tobe Hooper, the director, has said that there was always intended comedy in the first film as well,
mm-hmm.
and it's definitely there in some scenes. I think in the second movie, though, and I don't think anybody would disagree, that they go the whole 9 yards with it.
Yeah,
the sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, is way more comedy than it is horror.
You can tell right from the poster itself with the Sawyer crew recreating the poster from the Breakfast Club. You get the tone right away. It says, okay, this isn't going to be like the first one. And personally, I respect Tobe Hooper's decision to do something different.
Oh yeah, I like that
and
movie.
Which is nice. It's fresh, but I do think it, in a way, kind of for a lot of people, it could seem definitely very jarring, coming off something so gritty and so kind of almost amateurish in its art house vibes, to this definitely more slapsticky interpretation, which again I don't think is personally a bad thing, but if you were to think about just way too different, then I could see where you're coming from.
Yeah. And then I think 3 tries to emulate or at least recreate the original's tone. But I think where this one falls flat is that there's a lot going on in that movie where there's like the phony gas station, and then there's the previous victims that are trying to escape, and then there's like, you know, I don't know. 3 feels like it has a lot of ideas that aren't really explored, so it lacks focus.
Yeah.
Like there's the whole thing with Leatherface having like his toys that he plays with. Like remember he's got
he's got like a little speak and spell or something.
Yeah, and then there's there's the kid, and then there's the guy who runs the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the one family member who I always forget his name, but he's the one that's not Viggo Mortensen or the guy that runs the gas station. He's the one that gets his ear and fingers shot off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's so much going on that I feel like isn't as explored or as thought out as the previous 2 Chainsaw films are. Yeah. Two's off the wall and crazy, but I feel like I know who Chop Top is.
Yeah.
I feel like I know everything I need to know about, Grandpa. Like, he's kind of has a... You don't really know his backstory, but like I know enough. He's the best at killing. That's all I need to know. Yeah. In this movie, I'm like, oh, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Yeah. Who's she? What the fuck's going on here? Why is Leatherface doing that? Like, it's like there's some ideas there that I think are interesting, but not thought into.
Yeah, as you said, it's just got too much going on for its own good. And while some of the ideas are good, they just aren't focused enough with everything going on to kind of creates this whole clusterfuck of a mess. Yeah. And 3 is at the point where things start to get a little dicey in terms of the continuity of the series, as 2 was very clearly a direct sequel. You have the returning Cook character, you have Leatherface, of course, and you have corpses from the original movie make an appearance. 3 is the first one where it decides to do its own thing, and that'll be part of the course for the remainder of the franchise, which really gives it a sense of identity crisis.
Yeah, and then What about 4? How do you feel about 4? 4 is fucking crazy.
4 is batshit off the wall. To me, it's almost as good as 2 in my opinion, because it's just so bad, so all over the place that it definitely steeps into so bad it's good for me personally. From Matthew McConaughey's completely unhinged portrayal as Vilmer, the fucking Sawyer member with a goddamn air-pumped fucking robot leg, from him to Leatherface's like womanly appearance where he puts on like a woman's face, he does the makeup on, starts screaming like a girl for no reasons halfway through this movie. You have the out of nowhere Illuminati conspiracy plot with the Sawyers being like a government plant to inflict fear and torture on local residents, to the fucking biplane that shoots down from the heavens unbeknownst to everyone else and kills Matthew McConaughey and swoops off never to be seen again like an angel in the wind. It's nuts. It's horrible. It's got nothing going for it, but I kind of love it.
All right, fair enough. I can't fault you for that. And then there's the remake and beginning, which I'll kind of lump together because I have the same complaint, same thing. Same point to make between the 2 of them. I like both the remake and its prequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. My issue with them in relation to the first film is that they're way too clean and polished. Mm-hmm. They look too produced, I guess. Yeah. And I don't know, I think part of what made the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre so effective was its almost amateurish look. Yeah. I've said this to many people before. I think the best format to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on is VHS. I mean, I don't whip out the VCR every time I want to watch that movie. I'm sure there's great Blu-rays out there, but there's something about the grain and the grit in the first film that really helped create that atmosphere. Mm-hmm. The remake and the prequel to the remake get a lot right, but I think that's the key ingredient that they miss. And then there's 3D. Yeah,
3D is that's where I think people really started to turn their nose away. Where a lot of people thought the remake, and especially its prequel, would be maybe a little unnecessary, or at least failing in the like crazy high expectations it has to meet with the original. 3D is the first one where people started coming around and being like, I don't know about this, because 3D
Well, sorry, before you carry on,
Yeah,
I would say that people were probably saying that about 2, 3, and 4.
that's true.
But I think 2, 3, and 4 are not as widely known as 3D because I was talking to a coworker about making this video beforehand, and he goes, "Oh yeah, 3D. That's the third one, right?" And I was like, "No, it's a sequel slash retelling of the first. It's a sequel to the first movie." And he goes, "Oh, okay. So like I forget what year the remake, 2003, I think, right?
Remake was either 2 or 3. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, so he thought that 3D was a sequel to the remake, and I said, no, it's a sequel to the original film from the 70s. And he goes, "Oh, I didn't realize that." And I was like, "Yeah, but it ignores 2, 3, and 4." And he goes, "I didn't even know they made a second, third, and fourth one after the original. I thought it was the original and then the remake." And I got that same sentiment from every other coworker that was working, because I was shocked to find out that my coworker had no idea there were a second, third, and fourth Texas movie.
Yeah.
So I went around the kitchen being like, "Hey, yeah, you've seen the third or fourth Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie?" And he was like, "Oh, the one that came out a couple years ago." Everybody thought I was talking about either Leatherface or 3D. Nobody knew that there was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie between the 70s one and the remake.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think in the general public eye, 3D is definitely the one.
2 through 4 definitely have kind of lost its relevancy, I guess, in the mainstream eye. I guess more what I was saying with 3D, I guess, is the one where people really started to really crack down and start hating it. Well, I think the remake and the prequel definitely got lukewarm to mixed with the prequel, especially the more negative. I think 3D is the first one that just fucking tanked with reviews. I don't know how any of them have done at the box office, but 3D, it has some interesting ideas. It's got a lot of potential. At the time, it becomes, I think, the most narratively focused of the Texas Chainsaw movies, where a lot of the old ones from the 70s and so on were minimal in plot and more of just the pure, just nightmarish scenarios that were going on. This one follows a story, as it is a direct sequel to the original movie. And while there are some good ideas and some great kills with some great effects, everything they do right, they somehow do two things worse, which, with the great kills and the effects, they'll have awful kills, especially with the last one, and awful CGI effects. And the characters by this point have just become typical slasher absolute buffoons, and
have some of the worst lines in the whole series.
And they tend to one-liners.
"Go get him, cuz!"
"Do your thing, cuz!"
Oh yeah, that's
"Welcome to Texas, bitch!"
Oh,
something along like that.
And then right at the end of this rainbow shit is right at the end of this rainbow shit is the pot of gold, or pot of more shit. Leatherface. And Leatherface fucking sucks. It has the most obvious red herring in the entire series, or one of the most obvious red herrings in slasher films, period.
Ever.
Yeah, and just like, I don't know, it's cringy. We'll get into this more and what we would do to fix it, but yeah, Leatherface, neither of us are fans.
Not even close.
Alright, so what are the elements that we think would make the next one better? What do we think that the studio or whoever ends up making it should focus on that would please us and maybe other Texas fans?
We each have our own few key points that we're going to bounce off of and maybe, make some side points about, but I'll let my boy Benny Boy here start with his first one.
Alright, so I think the first thing that I want to say is I think it would be a smart decision to try to get back to the aesthetic of the first film, and kind of drop what they've been doing with the most recent movies. Really try to make the movie look I don't want to say amateurish, but raw, grainy.
Aside from like the great sets, the great way it really makes you feel the heat and the atmosphere of this Texas backwoods shithole is it doesn't just set up the Sawyers, it sets up the resident townsfolk, who are all just like, they're drunks, they're rolling over the ground, spewing out fucking world-ending prophecies before the characters even meet the killer family. majority of the horror takes place in broad daylight, which was pretty unique at the time, at least. Leatherface's first appearance isn't quite a while into the movie, and it's so sudden. There's no jump scare. There's no loud noise to it. He just shows up. You see this hulking, crazy thing, and he just pounds the fucking character down with a hammer, and it's so shocking and real, and his presence from there on is always known. But with the newer films, as you were mentioned before, is they definitely get the Hollywood budget at that point. As the first one was definitely more on the independent art house side, the newer ones, they got like the big Hollywood funding. They got the CGI, and they got the more elaborate, I guess, locations. But with it all, it just kind of waters it down.
I think in a nutshell, a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie could probably benefit from a low budget.
Yeah. And that's very possible. You look at fucking every single thing Blumhouse and James Wan touches, made for piss money, but they a lot of the time turn out and look great, and they make a fuck ton of money because of that. So doing a Texas film in the same way is easily possible.
Yeah. And I'll let you tackle the next point then. Moving on.
My first point I made is actually in relation to that interesting story you had telling about your coworker, is that when people are asked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, people always obviously will think of the original, and then probably right after the remake, and then maybe the beginning, its prequel. But then no one hardly even bats an eye at the 2 through 4, and then they'll think about 3D and Leatherfaces are the newest ones. But that's my main point, is that after 2, essentially each movie is trying to do its own thing, create its own timeline, rename the characters numerous times. Leatherface goes from Leatherface to Bubba to Junior to just Leather to Jedediah, and the Sawyers go from the Sawyers to the Slaughters in 4, and then to the Hewitts in the remake, and then back to the Sawyers in 3D and Leatherface, and then there's this weird convoluted marriage plot with the Carson family. But my main point I'm trying to make here is that I want a future movie to stand truly on its own. Don't try to call itself the new Texas Chainsaw. Don't try to force its kind of sneak its way into the old franchise. Just make it its own standalone movie with its own standalone characters and tone and consistency. And if it were to branch off into further continuations of it, to keep that up. Don't just immediately fall for the past mistakes of the original timeline, I guess you could say, is because there's just no identity. Every movie almost has a different tone, and they almost get like more and more mean-spirited by the time Leatherface comes around.
Which will be in your next point,
Which will be continued on later on. But, yeah, I just want these movies to just find itself again and just create its own identity, and because newcomers have no idea what the fuck to expect going into the franchise anymore. How are you supposed to explain to them this convoluted web?
Yeah, it's like you say, oh, have you seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel? Some people might be like, oh, the beginning, or oh, Leatherface. Or if you say, have you seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? Some people might assume that you're talking about 3D, like my coworker, because 3D sets itself up as being a direct sequel to the original, when I'm meaning 2, or even 3 technically, even though it says 3 in the title, it doesn't really follow 2 at all. It has a cameo from 2, but it's not canon or anything. Like, the storyline, like, they all try to snake into each other's plots, and they all try to make sense of this whole fucking garbage timeline. I mean, I'm willing to accept movies that are like, I'm willing to accept a series that is like, hey, here's the first 4 films are all connected, and then we try to remake with a prequel, and then we tried rebooting it twice, and now here we are.
Yeah.
Like a Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
The first 8 Fridays are undisputably a part of the same series.
Yes. Then
you could try to figure out a bit of a timeline, including the next 3 New Line movies, and then there's the remake. Halloween has Halloween 1 through, Curse of Michael Myers are all connected, 3 being the oddball.
Yes.
And then, remake series, and then the reboot that ignores everything.
Mm-hmm.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like, okay, the first one, second one, sequel to the original. 3, ignores 2, but we're still calling it 3. 4, it takes place in there somewhere. Remake, prequel. 3D is a sequel to the first film, ignoring 2, 3, 4. And then Leatherface is a prequel to the original, and it's not clear if this movie acknowledges 2, 3, 4, the prequel 3D. Oh my god, like, there is nothing there. If you make another Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, focus on, I guess, just your own story. Not the lore. Don't worry about anything else. Make it its own isolated thing. And then I'll just quickly go through my next point, and then my next point is plain and simple: practical special effects. I think CGI is a useful tool, and I don't think either of us really hate on CGI. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely terrible CGI out there.
There's terrible special, like, practical effects. It's just, I'm not one for the CGI, anti-CGI snobs who see anything that's not technically there, hence it's bad. But the thing is, with especially Texas Chainsaw Massacre and slasher films, practical effects in the kills, especially, that's kind of part of the magic for those films. It is part of the magic specifically for those kind of films, because it's the craft and the clever ways they show things. In the remake, for example, they have that pretty crazy shot where the hitchhiker woman shoots herself in the mouth, and then you get the crazy little shot of the camera zooming out of the bullet head from her face and then exits out the exit wound, and it's all done practically, and it looks pretty sweet. But then you have 3D and other movies that do a lot of CGI in the kills, and it just feels hollow and doesn't look all that special.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. All right, Dakota, the final point that you got.
Okay, final point is, I'll try to keep it more concise. This one is pretty simple, you have to stop creating this weird-ass narrative where in the original 4, they didn't do this really at all. But come 3D, they start pushing this narrative that maybe Leatherface is not such a bad guy. Maybe the Sawyers aren't the only bad people for some reason. Maybe there's this corrupt cop family that kills them all, and so now they're kind of the bad guys, but the Sawyers are still a bunch of cannibalistic serial killers. And part of the first one's magic is that while they were mysterious. They didn't have like a whole family history. By 3D, they try to explain every single member of it and give them, there's no mystery to them anymore. They're just this like backwoods family hierarchy that just kills people for fun, and it's not scary anymore.
Yeah, you before we started recording, you talked about how this is very much a Rob Zombie thing.
Yeah, with the weird thing is that with Rob Zombie, I feel he's felt a lot of influence from the original film with his films House of a Thousand Corpses and the sequel, Devil's Rejects. I have not seen the sequel to that, Three from Hell, so I can't speak of that, but it definitely feels like his version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what with the insane murder family and such, and the very one singular memorable character, Leatherface versus Captain Spaulding. And then it's like the Texas movies saw what he's doing with his writing, with making the killers the protagonists, and decided we want to do that too. So by Leatherface, your protagonists that you follow and serve as like the moral center and who you want to see succeed are a group of escaped mental patients who are all killers. There's especially the two, Ike and his sadistic necrophiliac arsonist girlfriend. They go on a killing spree and murder a bunch of innocent people in a diner, execution style with a shotgun. But then, why would I care when the corrupt cops come and kill them? The only sympathetic character at all is the nurse they kidnap.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like, Rob Zombie's got his own style, and he has a very interesting way of telling that kind of story where the bad guys, aren't the only bad guys. He's just better at it than they did it in the two Texas movies, 3D and Leatherface in particular. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like, I'm sure that this is something that it's just not to our taste. No. Personally, this is very much a taste thing. But I don't know, like, to me, part of what made the original Texas work so much, and even in the sequels to a much lesser extent, is that you really attach yourself and relate to one of the characters that is caught in the middle of this chaos. Mm-hmm. And then in these two new movies, his cousin, how do you pronounce her name? Daddario? Completely is like, all those people you killed, my friends, hey, we're cousins, right? I think it was the Insane Clown Posse who said, my homies are family too, third cousins, get out of here, or something like that.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I don't know, man. They take it to the extreme in those movies where I'm like, I can tell that the filmmakers are trying to make me sympathize with these serial killer, rapist, cannibal, whatever have you. But I just don't, and it really bogs down the experience.
This issue mainly pertains to Leatherface, as it's only kind of really brought in at the end for 3D. But Leatherface, there's no innocence really. There in the original, you have Sally, who ends up being the final girl, and you have this horrifying nightmarish dinner scene with him that took over 24 hours to shoot. But in that scene, you feel bad for her because she's surrounded by these crazy maniacs who just want to inflict torture and psychological pain on her. But by the time Leatherface comes around, the only characters are corrupt cops who abuse their power and escaped serial killers from a mental institution, and the only one character that's sympathetic in any way is the kidnapped nurse, who doesn't really make at all impact at all in the film.
Yeah.
And it makes this mean-spirited, unpleasant watch where it goes full edgelord with the cursing and the over gratuitous violent scenes, and it's just, why would I want to watch that?
A movie like that can be entertaining, and I think that there's definitely an interesting stories you can tell with bad guy versus bad guy dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that Leatherface did it so poorly that it kind of has left a bad taste in my mouth, that if in a new Texas movie were to come out, I would much rather see a much clearer bad guy good guy dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think that's it.
That sums up what we had to say pretty much to the point, and yeah, I don't have anything else to say. What about you?
No, I'm good. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, the audio works out for this one. Thanks. Yeah, see ya.
We'll see you next time.
Nobody watches this far into these videos
That's
anyway,
fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'm leaving this all in.
Okay, that's fine. I understand.